Oh! Oh my God!
Hello, my name is Officer Bradley. I retired from the force 10 years ago at the ripe age of 50. I'll begin with a story from my 20 years as a police officer that stuck with me like a deep thorn. I still remember the date. It was January 17, 2005. We got a call about a woman who had locked herself in her bathroom. She said her boyfriend was trying to kill her. My partner Mason and I arrived at the house at the end of the street. We took a position at the front door. We knocked on the door and asked to open it. Nobody opened the door. Mason kicked the door open with all the force he could muster. We scanned the house downstairs, but no one was there. We heard a sound from upstairs. It was a woman crying. We had expected the lady to be downstairs, but she wasn't. We made our way upstairs. "Ma'am? Are you okay?" I asked. I confronted her saying, "You're safe, no one's going to hurt you." The crying stopped as if someone hit a pause. Then she said from inside the bathroom, "But he's still here." My partner and I had checked the entire house, but no one was there. Suddenly from downstairs, we heard the door getting shut. My partner and I gave each other a gaze, and I could notice his brow sweating despite the cold night. I used my head to gesture for him to take a look. He stood from atop the stairs and looked down at the front door. "Just the wind, I think," he said. Then a gentle voice came from inside the bathroom. "Are you sure, Officer Bradley?" the woman asked. The entire night at that scene, neither my partner Mason nor I used our names out loud. Not once. "Ma'am? Do you need help or not?" Mason asked. "We need to know you're okay, so step back because I'm kicking it in." A part of me believes Mason was more eager to see the woman's face, to find out who she was and how she knew our names. Then she said the unexpected. "Officer Bradley, tell Mason that if he touches this door, I will visit his family in the late hours of a certain night." The woman's voice was an octave deeper when she said that. My partner's face was pale after hearing that. I couldn't stop my partner from kicking the bathroom door this time. But when he did, we found nobody inside. There wasn't a window above the shower through which to escape or another door to go through. And yet, we were certain that we just had a full conversation with a woman behind this door. We scanned the entire house, including the backyard, one last time, inch by inch. Nothing. My partner and I communicated nonverbally the rest of the night. So when it was time to leave, we gave each other a look and left the house without even looking back. Now, this is the part of the story I haven't told anyone. Not even Mason. We were sufficiently disturbed, so I didn't want to tell him what I'm about to tell you. When we left the house, I drove us back to the station that night. He probably thought I didn't notice, but his hands were shaking too much to drive comfortably. As I reversed the cruiser out the street, Mason didn't look back at the house. But the truth is, I did. And I sincerely wish that I hadn't. I looked and squinted at a garbage can by the side of the house to see a strange, dark figure kneeling by the gate as if it was watching us leave. And as we finally drove away, as the house became more and more distant in our mirror, the figure slowly stood itself up. And, I'll swear even today, that as it stood up, it didn't stop rising until its head peeked over the roof of that two-story house. I am 60 years old now, but still, this incident haunts me every night. So this incident is one of the most disturbing incidents I have ever had. As a deputy sheriff, I was working in a rural town approximately 20 minutes from the main city in my county. At approximately 1:30 a.m., I was dispatched to a traffic accident in a canal. I arrived on the scene with CHP to find an overturned vehicle in an empty canal. No driver or passengers in sight. At first, we figured the driver left the scene after the accident. But, after getting a closer look, the canal floor was muddy and no foot impressions were leaving the vehicle. We lit up the canal, took a side, and started walking down the canal to see if anyone had been ejected. We were about to give up when I stopped and looked over to the CHP officer on the opposite side of the canal. I asked if maybe the body was under the car. My flashlight was angled down into the canal and caught the bottom of 2 shoe soles with the body of a man covered in mud. I wouldn't have seen him if it weren't for his clean soles. Being a sheriff coroner, I set out to notify his next of kin. I found an old address of the man, and approximately at 3:30 a.m., I reached his house. I knocked on the door, but the door was already open. I entered the house and saw some pictures on the walls. As I was looking at the pictures, I heard someone saying, "I've been waiting for you." I turned around and shone my light onto the porch. An elderly Hispanic woman was sitting in a rocking chair in the total darkness of the porch. I asked her how she knew I was coming. She replied without emotion, "I know, my son died about 2 hours ago." I confirmed her son's name and asked if there was anyone with him. She said no, he was alone. He went to a party and had too much to drink. I asked how she knew he passed and she responded, "At 1:30 a.m., my son came to me while I was sleeping to say goodbye and he was sorry. My son told me that a young cop found him and would be visiting me soon. So I got up and sat on the porch to wait for you." I was surprised by her words and I told her that I was sorry for her loss and left without saying any extra words. I told this incident to my colleagues, but nobody believed me. Of course, I don't even expect them to believe me. So I am going to share one of the creepiest cases of my police career. Once I received a welfare check call one night late, between 2:30 to 3 a.m. The case was that an elderly woman who lived next door to the caller had not been seen for some time. That night we were having a bad thunderstorm without the rain. I got to the complainant's house to speak to her first, wondering why she called at this time. She told me the lady next door is in her 90s, lives alone and she has not seen her in weeks. She explained that she had called, gone over, and knocked on her door, but the lady would not answer. I started thinking she was probably deceased and had been for some time. The car had a 3-inch layer of dust on it, the mail was piling up and no lights were on. First I walked to the side door and knocked on the door with my flashlight. After a few minutes of no response, I turned around and walked to the backyard looking at the windows, and found everything okay. The complainant was with me and was saying she didn't know of any relatives of the lady. I was sure by now that she was probably deceased. I walked to the front of the house and noticed that her blinds were up on the front windows and I could see a glow from inside. I am however not tall enough to look into the windows, which are probably 7 feet off the ground. The complainant runs next door and grabs a bucket for me to stand on. I got on the bucket and I could see the living room. The glow was from the TV, which was on a blue screen and was bright enough. I didn't need my flashlight to see in. I looked first at the floor to make sure she had not fallen there. The couch, recliner, everything was empty. The telephone home base was blinking red with the missed calls and voicemails. From the living room was a dark hallway and I couldn't see down. Using my flashlight, I could only see an open door down the hall. Still no signs of life. I turned around and told the complainant that everything looked okay and nothing was disturbed. I turned back around and an elderly woman was looking back at me with her face right up next to the glass. I couldn't breathe, it felt as if I had been hit in the chest by a bat. I fell backward and off of the bucket. I hit the ground hard and the complainant rushed to me. I pushed her off as she was trying to help me up and I ran back up on the bucket. My heart was pounding, but I had to see. Instinct had my hand on my gun, and the other was up on the window. I looked back inside and saw a frail elderly woman standing in the hallway wearing a long nightgown with her back to me. She turned her head to the side and looked at me out of the corner of her eye and slowly walked out of view and down the dark hallway. I got down and looked at the complainant who was standing there with a puzzled look on her face. All I could say was I saw her. By now the wind had picked up and it began to rain. I began to walk back to my car by the road and I turned back to the complainant and said, "Don't come back here." I got into the car and drove to the department. I never found out about the lady who lived there. The complainant didn't call back and the house now has different tenants inside. Some things are better left alone.